I will be transparent, I think I hate it because it puts me face to face with my own weaknesses and it tells me that I still have a lot of work to do to become a great photographer. During my recent travel with my friends visiting me in Japan, I wanted to bring my Sigma 24-70 as an all-round lens to document our trip, but then I remembered that this time it wouldn't be a walking trip, but precious time to enjoy with my friends, so I changed my mind and decided to go for a slightly lighter setup and brought only my 35mm, which is still quite heavy as it is the Sigma 1.4, but let's come back to the weight issue a little later. For the most part, I enjoy shooting at 35mm, but somewhere I love to hate that lens, or more generally speaking, the 35mm focal length. I like how my fellow YouTuber and photographer James Parson puts it. 35mm is the boring focal length. It benefits from absolutely no physical aspects that will make your images look special, like a lot of compression or a super wide perspective that cannot be experienced with the human eye. Because there is no trickery to make a catchy social media banger, the only way to take a good image is actually having a good composition, some intriguing elements, very good light or excellent timing to catch a special scene, or in other words, catching a compelling image in its essence. I often find myself struggling because there is just too much element to make a concise, a minimal composition, and it is either not wide enough to capture and play with the immensity of a scene. 35mm is the focal length closest to how our eyes perceive a scene in terms of compression and field of view we can focus on. You know, our eyes can almost see at 180 degrees, but the actual field of view or angle we can assess information is about the one we get at 35mm equivalent. And because of that, a photo that was taken at 35mm can feel boringly normal. But now, even though English is not my native language, I try to choose my words appropriately, and there is a reason why I say I love to hate it, because I still want to evoke this feeling of love I have for this lens, despite all I said before. First, because it is certainly the best tool to learn photography and learn how to compose an image. Maybe the hard way, yes, and it can be tricky not to feel discouraged, but because it is the boring focal length, you will have to work double the amount to take an interesting photo with it. If you manage to have a regular photography practice with a 35mm focal length, regardless of the camera brand or the actual lens, you will make tremendous progress in photography, I can guarantee that. And the more you can keep shooting with it without switching to another lens, the better. So you can train your eye to see and think about compositions at 35mm. And that's definitely something I'm guilty of not doing, but let's skip that topic for another video maybe. And the second reason why I love 35mm, and this one comes down a little bit more to the actual lens, I am with the Sigma 1.4, but I'm pretty sure another one opening at 1.8 could produce very similar result. With such aperture, you can play with the bokeh in a very intentional way, so it can help you create greater subject separation while keeping the context. Let me explain a bit deeper this point. If, let's say, you shoot at 1.8 with an 85mm, the bokeh will be so pronounced, and yes, you will have a very obvious subject separation, but you will also lose a lot of the context. That can be good for some portrait work and different sorts of photo gigs, but for street, travel, and environmental portrait, it is probably not the best option. Not to mention that it is easier to compose at 85mm when you can technically cancel a big part of your frame thanks to the bokeh blur. With the 35mm, you will still have to work your scene, even the elements that will be out of focus, to make a clean composition, but when you nail it, I think you can get very good images. Now a quick word about this Sigma 1.4. I love the images it produces, everything about it. The autofocus, the sharpness, the bokeh are all stellar, but one big problem for me is the weight. And that is something inevitable for full frame lenses opening at 1.4. So much glass is needed that no matter what, the lens will be heavy. It is not a problem for even portraits and all that sort of stuff, but for shooting streets, I kinda regret having only this option available. Shooting streets and getting better at it comes down a lot to your endurance and your ability to shoot more often and for a longer period of time. And typically, when you have heavier gear, you could be tempted to cut your session short or not going out at all. If any of you is shooting with the Sony 35 1.8, go ahead and leave your impression in the comments. I am considering switching to that one, but at the same time, when I see the images I get with the Sigma, particularly the portraits and family photos I take, it reminds me how good of a lens it is. Tough choice.
Here, I wanted to incorporate some motion blur in the form of a moving subject in the foreground. I positioned myself, framed my shot, put my shutter speed at 1/25 and waited for quite a while, until this taxi came, whose colors were perfect to complement the tones of the overall image.
So that's gonna be it for today's video. We catch up in the next one. Bye.